Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we're exploring how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today I want to ask a question that feels more urgent by the day. Are knowledge jobs dying? Because let's be honest, the last few years have taught us that AI can already analyze, draft, summarize, even advise. And knowledge work is exactly the kind of work we thought only humans could do. So if the tools are this good already, what does that mean for consultants, analysts, researchers, and managers, the backbone of so many organizations? That's why I wanted to talk to Pratap Khedkar, CEO of ZS. He has a PhD in AI, but he's also spent more than 2 decades inside the consulting world, building a firm where knowledge is the product. If consulting is one of the professions most exposed to AI, Pratap has a front row seat to how it's evolving. Pratap, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
So let's start right there. Are knowledge jobs dying?
Knowledge jobs are evolving. And what do I mean by that? There's a little bit of dying for sure. But to me, it's almost like instead of talking about the future of less work, I think of it as a journey from more work to less work to different work. What do I mean by that? I think what will happen to knowledge jobs is what happened to accounting when Excel came along. People said, oh, accountants used to size up a whole column of numbers and add it in their head. Excel is going to make the accountant completely redundant. Of course, that didn't happen. Excel's amazing at what it does. The accountants moved on to other things. You got more creative. The whole profession got pushed up further to try to transform, to do different things that there wasn't enough time to do because you were doing all the things that Excel can do now. So think of it that way, is that the knowledge worker gets pushed along the spectrum to evolve further, do different things, not the same things, but that is going to feel very uncomfortable. It's not going to be something that everybody else will take to easily. But I think that is the journey we are on. And we are seeing that every day in even our work.
So that's a really good thing. And you did bring up, you're right, I called it the future of less work. And frankly, when I started that, I didn't mean the technology will take our job version. I actually meant that I think we should be doing less of what doesn't matter and more of what does. So the interesting question is, we have this linear idea, right? Technology started to think, therefore we don't need us anymore. And you're saying, no, we just need to find new things to think about, to actually contribute. I'm curious whether you can see what those are in terms of that human value in consulting, for example.
Yeah. So in fact, we are actually seeing that very much now, and we are preparing our firm to transform as well. So what are some things that at least a firm like ZS does? A lot of consulting firms are moving to specialization, because one of the things we are realizing about AI, as you see with all these tools out there like ChatGPT, is that general AI thinking it's actually really good at. It's summarizing things, like you said. It's doing a lot of work. It's coming up with good responses. The English, the syntax checking, the document writing, everything is fantastic. However, when you get into very specialized areas of the human domain, like how to diagnose cancer for a patient that's sitting in front of you, how to actually convey medical information in a deep discussion between a medical science liaison, or how do I go through hundreds or millions of molecules to discover the next big drug blockbuster. So very, very specialized scientific tasks. AI, at least today, is not able to keep up with the nuances of specialization. So that's one thing to remember. Now, you could argue, hey, we just have to wait 10 more years and even that will be done by AI, perhaps. But we are seeing that this domain-specific verticalization of very narrow but deep thinking is something that a general AI that's trained on what you find on the internet, that is not quite able to get there, at least for the next few years. So that's one niche that is becoming really critical, where humans work together with AI to make sure they get the depth, the domain, the vertical part of specialization right on a horizontal substrate, which takes care of the daily stuff.
So, okay, so let me kind of pause with that for a second, because intuitively, it does feel like a time frame thing, right? Like right now, it's almost like, okay, so AI went to school, maybe it's doing college. At some point it'll do the PhD, right? We also take our time until we get to the very narrow verticals. Some of us never do, right? So this idea that that's the solution for humans, I think it bothers me a little bit because it just means we're pushing out the problem by a couple of years.
Yeah. No, so that's one piece of it. I think the second piece of it, which we are absolutely seeing as well, is, at ZS, one of the things we teach all our people is, as you progress through the firm in consulting, what are the skills? You start off with saying, do the analysis right. The next step is do the right analysis. The
Mm-hmm.
third step is get the right answer. And the fourth step is
Ask
ask
the
the right
right
question.
question, of course.
And that's, the classic consulting evolution. And what you're saying is exactly this, that AI is coming up this chain. It's obviously very good at doing the right analysis if I tell it what to do. Of course, there are the usual things around hallucinations and guardrails and checking. Fine. That's a matter of time. It's a matter of maybe more data. That'll get figured out. The next step, generally good. With agentic AI, true agentic AI, we are going to get the right answer. But one of the challenges that you see in AI with these tools today is they will never tell you, no, that's not the right question to ask. They will be
Yes.
in a hurry to give you the answer to the question you have asked. And
Yes.
so I think a big part of at least the consulting domain is going to be, are you asking the right question? Are you challenging your client to say, no, this is not the right way to think about it? Because our clients come back to us. They say, oh, I have something in mind. Give me this. And we say, no. Why do you think you want this? Why? Why? Ask 6 whys to get to the deeper question of what is behind their issue. And to get that, to get to that level of asking the right question, you have to develop trust. You have to know this person really well. They have to really uncover and tell you sort of what is the underlying deep problem that they may not even be aware of till you question them. The second piece is they have to be very, very, there's a level of intimacy. There is a level of credibility. There's a level of reliability that gets established. That's sort of the trust equation in terms of the client and the consultant. I think that's the second aspect where consultants will need to push themselves. It's always been a part of consulting, but it has not always been an indispensable part of consulting. But I think focusing on that is part of the transformation, the evolution of the consultant. Of course, then latter aspects of it, along with the specialization, get you to the right answer. So those
And
are.
thank you. And I think that you're actually touching, I think, where what feels like the human bottleneck these days, right? Because we're rolling out tools. And a lot of companies are, I think that's their checkbox at implementing AI. They're bringing in the tools, but we're lagging in the adoption, the skills, the redesign of processes that we need to do around that. What do you think is the biggest bottleneck today to actually do this correctly?
Yeah, I think you nailed one of these bottlenecks. We are seeing this a lot. The picture I show, imagine a person training in a gym. One side of their muscles, the left side, is absolutely amazing, and the other side is extremely weak. I think the technology has gotten ahead of the human. The human side is not changing, both in terms of mindset, in terms of the skills, in terms of adoption, in terms of rethinking the process. And as that lags behind, they are not able to embrace the promise of AI to the extent that the technology makes it available. In fact, there was a report out from MIT just in the last couple of weeks, which said that 95% of the Gen AI investments have not seen any impact yet. So it's like the quote, right? Which is AI is everywhere except on the bottom line. So
So,
from
so why do you think, or maybe I should say, what does it take to start exercising the other hand, right? The other muscle.
so I think there are two or three considerations that we're seeing. One is the type of rollout that you discussed. It's been a productivity rollout, meaning I have 20,000 people in my company. They should all get facile with using ChatGPT or whatever the tool is. They can write
Yes.
faster emails, memos. All that is great. But in terms of actual impact, all the challenges you were talking about, you have to identify two or three business processes and then throw AI at them. Not AI for the sake of AI because it impacts a particular business problem of
Give me
outsourcing.
an example, because one would say, I mean, general managers would say, okay, but I think it needs to impact all business processes, so I want all my managers to implement AI
No,
on
so
all
actually
business.
that's the wrong approach.
Okay, thank you. Tell me
I
what you
think
think.
I
Yeah,
think
give me an
what I'm
example.
basically saying is if you force everybody, you get a graveyard of successes. Everybody chalks off a victory and says, hey, I did this little proof of concept experiment. There are hundreds of pilots, thousands of successes, and none of them scales. At the end of the day, the work hasn't really changed. The organization has not seen the impact. So I think number one, the organization has to prioritize. And this is coming from the top down. It's coming from CEOs. They're saying, give me 3, 4, 5 big use cases where you are going to change everything, include AI. By the way, AI is not the only thing. You have to redesign the process. Of course, build in the AI, many pieces of AI, different kinds of AI. Get me proprietary data because AI is not just about the model. It's about the fact that this thing will keep learning on data that I only have, my organization has, the other organization doesn't have.
Yeah,
So
otherwise, what makes you unique, right?
exactly. Otherwise, everything is in Chat GPT anyway. So what is it that the internet doesn't have that I have that makes my AI superior to everybody else's AI? That is the second aspect that's coming in terms of the specific use case. I'll give you a clear example. Let's look at a marketing organization. They have a product. It's selling, whatever, $400 million a year. That's fantastic. How do I go from 400 to 600? So it's that kind of problem, which is I have a product. How do I increase its sales? Well, it turns out I have thousands of customers. What do I need to know about each of these customers? Well, there's data on the internet, but that's not enough. I have to buy data. I have to create data because my people interact with the customers every day. What they said, the questions they asked, how many times they rejected the product, how many times they bought the product. This is all data only I have. And the AI in Chat GPT has had no opportunity to learn from it.
So you're saying, okay, if you're talking to a manager to or leader of an organization, you're saying, okay, yeah, employees need to learn how to use AI, but that's not scaling, right? What will really shift is if you select 2, 3 problems and ask, what can I do now that I couldn't before? What kind of data do I have that nobody else has that I can use to do something I couldn't do before?
Absolutely. And the other thing that is happening is people think of data as a passive thing, stuff of numbers or now text lying around in a file. No. What AI means is that I can generate data that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Let me give you an
Or use
example.
data that wasn't tabled or,
Yeah,
structured in a way that you
absolutely.
could use
Anything.
it before, right? Because if I think of your customer question, there's a lot of data lying around that we didn't necessarily pull together to look at as one piece in
Because we
organization.
didn't think of it as data. It was in somebody's head, it was in somebody's files, it
Yeah,
was in
or it
somebody's
was not structured in a way that we could do. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is really interesting. Do you think this is a training issue or is this a leadership issue?
uh, it's a bit of both. I think primarily we are seeing in the initial days, it is a leadership issue. Because the leaders who say, oh, AI, everybody should use it, checkbox.
For
That doesn't work.
productivity so that I can cut headcount. That's the conversation these days.
That's the conversation these days. And what some leaders, I was just talking to another general manager of a business that runs the entire US, said, you know what? They will all learn to get better at emails. That's 3%, 5% productivity savings. Great. They should do it. But I'm not interested in cutting jobs or doing productivity because of that. What would be interesting to me is the impact on the top line and the bottom line because of better processes, not because I can eliminate a few people whose job can get automated. I think most organizations try to look for the top line first. I agree, some of them want to also cut costs and do the bottom line thing, but Wall Street rewards you in the end, long term, if you can actually be a growing business.
Yeah, no, you're right. Of course. I think the problem is how do we get there? So what seems to be happening is that you basically say, I have a team of 10 people doing this. I'll bring in AI. I can have now 3 people doing that, or, maybe they'll do even 10x in a few years. Which is not, let's select 2, 3 big things and tackle them, and just, I think I'm almost tempted to say, and let the rest be for a while, because you can't do change management across everything all the time. It doesn't work. People can't do that.
And so one of the things that we are also pushing, pick those 3-4 use cases, these large, hairy problems, allow for the fact that it will take 2 years to solve this problem. So this is not about, did you get better in 3 months and so I can have some cost cuts. It's, I'm going to give you 18 to 24 months and I need it scaled. Don't just show it once. Make it work for every brand, every country. Like show me global scale, because then the leadership cares. And here we get to this point of change management or adoption that you were talking about, is that adopt AI is not a rallying cry. Adopt this new process so that your department or function or outcome can be that much better. AI is one of the tools, but here will be some other tools that you will have to use, like this new data, proprietary thinking. Yes, there will be some AI models involved. Absolutely. We are going to completely change the process so that these parts of the process which we used to do are completely eliminated. Not because AI is doing them, but because with AI, we can rethink the whole process to have fewer steps. Things like that.
That makes so much sense. And I'm actually trying to run all the leadership announcements I've seen in the last, year, and they are adopt AI rallying cry. They're not, how do I take this and restructure this? They're actually trying to do like end-to-end enterprise implementation. And you're telling them don't.
I'm telling them, you want to experiment for a year? Great. Go have fun. Get everybody used to it. That's fine. But the real impact of AI will not come from that. It will come because you have put your faith, pressure, effort, resources, focus as a leader into 3-4 big things.
Have you seen someone do this? Do you have an example? You might have one and you can't share, but I'm curious whether.
No, we have. I think, in fact, in one case, for instance, they said, all right, I'll give you a pharmaceutical client example. That's one of the clients we work with. They said, all right, we've got commercial, which is sales and marketing. We've got research and development, and we've got supply chain and manufacturing. What is my biggest problem as a CEO today? Well, let's pick one problem from commercial and one from R&D. And what is the problem? The problem is we've got all these trials going on in R&D. We are not recruiting patients fast enough. So this is a very specific use case.
Yeah, patient data.
Yeah. And okay, I've got these 10 trials running in immunology. I need to recruit patients quickly, because if I don't, these trials will go on forever. They will cost a lot of money and they will probably end in failure, because if you don't recruit enough patients, it doesn't matter. Like the statistical result will not come about because I don't have any
that's
patients.
Clear. So how does AI solve this?
So then AI gets into, okay, let's make sure that we can accelerate the trial. AI figures out by looking at data, of proprietary data, by the way, not just data on the internet. Is this clinical site able to recruit patients as much as you thought it would? I mean, I'll give you a very scary stat. 11% of all clinical trial sites are able to recruit 0 patients. So at the end of the trial, they have not recruited a single person. So 11% of trial sites are just wasted. If I recruit a patient into a clinical trial, 1 out of these 3 patients is going to drop out before the end, which means all the work you did with them is absolutely completely wasted, thrown out the window, because I can't submit that to the FDA because they dropped out before the end. So you can see.
So how does AI forecast who will succeed in terms of
correct
of recruiting and sticking around? Yeah.
So imagine the following thing. There are people called clinical research associates that go to these sites and take down notes, 2 pages worth. They have a question box and so on. What GenAI does is it looks at that. It looks at these notes for all the sites and is able to predict this site is going to run into problems with clinical recruitment 6 to 9 months from now. Either you fix it or you shut it down now. That's a very concrete way of looking at information that that person didn't have because they were not reading what was happening across the country.
Okay, so this is kind of, we used to call these like the soft signs, right? The soft signals, the things that maybe we can't tell, but when you start working with data, you can identify these connections that maybe our eye isn't able to see. And you're basically saying that's an example of where if you identify what the problem is you're trying to solve and throw AI at it, you might go find things you never noticed before or asked before.
Exactly. Not just that, it makes things possible for a single human. So this is back to transforming the job. So imagine that this person, or let's take a commercial problem, that you've got a salesperson talking to a customer. In real time, they are able to say, what has this customer done before? What are they saying now? How are they feeling? What is the likelihood that they are going to actually drop out and not close the deal? And what are the 3 things I can do or say or offer to them right now on this
Right.
call?
Yeah, you can give me real time. I've talked a lot about the ambient AI, right? So you
Right.
kind of, it's there for you when you need it.
Need. And
Yeah.
so what happens with this is that that same person gets much more productive. So this is
Yes.
what I'm going back to that use case. The use case is I want to increase my total sales. I have 2,000 people, make them 20% more productive by arming them individually with this AI enabled next best
Yeah.
action or
And
whatever.
I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is a lot of the AI implementation came from the bottom. So people figured out what to do with it. And then when we went at it from the top, a lot of organizations went at it with either an end-to-end enterprise conversation or a productivity conversation. And you're saying, no, you need to learn first. You can't, it doesn't work. Plus, the reason I really agree with you is I've been talking about the human side all the time. And I think one, there's fear. We talked about the future of less work, right? I mean, if you go with an announcement that I'm going to bring in AI across the board and half of you won't have a job at the end of this process, why would I help, right? Why would I bother? So there's fear. But two, there's also a limit to what people can tolerate in terms of change management. So you're suggesting find, a couple, 2, 3 big things that will help you understand how to do this and treat them like pilots, but bottom line pilots, not, that's really interesting. So we talked about leaders. What about people?
Yeah. No, that's the third element, which is all this happens leadership, clarity, use cases, working out all the details together, leverage proprietary data. But this is the hardest part, people on the ground. So we talked about the sales rep. Well, they'll get all this stuff. But what if they ignore it? Because of fear, because of discomfort, because they don't trust it, and they don't do any of those things, then your AI will not have had any impact. And so then the question is, you fail. So then there is a lot of focus nowadays. And that's easier because, as you said, if you focus on a couple of areas, you can throw all your muscle into change management and adoption. And adoption, there are many tricks, right? So this person has to work with this AI, this thing coming in. There's this old adage, this cake mix that you see. Remember the cake mix you buy for pancake mix and boom, boom, boom. It says, crack open an egg, put it in the mix it up. That egg actually makes no difference.
It
But
just,
the egg,
the idea that I was part of the process.
yes,
Yes.
you have to make the human feel part of the process,
Yeah, how simple.
right? It's a simple thing. But what we have found is, yeah, you get this advanced guard of people who you think, are generally open and maybe a couple of skeptics. You get them involved in the advanced pilot. They help shape it, okay? It's not that the AI has to be obeyed 100% of the time. Maybe their shaping is that AI is 80% of the time, and then there's some nuance that the human mixes in their egg. And the point is, then they are part of the process. They feel like they contributed. They feel like they added something. they are actually open about adopting it. Then they begin to see the results. They become champions to the other people because people listen to peers. They're not going to listen to top management
Yeah.
when it comes to stuff like this. And they're like, this person said it really worked for him, and I can see them doing really good on their sales quotas. Maybe they have something. Maybe I'll pay attention to 30% of this. And so we see the adoption actually creep up from 30 to 50 to 70 to 80, 90% in some of these systems that I've talked about. And that has been really eye opening, which is how do you change the humans one step at a time to leverage AI? And what happens to them is unknowingly their job has been transforming because all the work they used to do on Sunday, sitting down and figuring out what they're going to do during the week, they don't have to do it. AI has done it. But then that frees them up to focus more time and spend it with the customer face to face rather than sitting at home planning on how they're going to interact with the customer.
Yeah, it's essentially, I'm having two conversations in my mind right now. The first one was, okay, that's like first line management 101, right? We tell first line managers, how do you engage your people? You get them involved. You don't dump everything on them and tell them to go do it. But you're also in a way saying it's the same idea of instead of go pilot, big agenda items, you're also saying go find the people that are the early adopters, the more amenable, bring them in, help them bring their peers, which we also know from change management, right? You need to get those first 16% on board and they'll bring in the rest.
Yeah, and again, like I said, these are not new ideas; they're actually common sense ideas. But all these top-down, fearful technology pushes forget that this is how humans will react. And if they
Yeah.
don't adopt the AI, you won't see the impact. And then the messaging around the organization turns negative, which is, oh, this is just another hype. We'll just wait till this fad is over, and like whatever else. There have been many business fads in the past. This one feels very different.
Yeah,
Um,
it does. But what I'm thinking suddenly is that you're basically telling us to slow down to speed up,
yeah.
which is very interesting. Wow, thank you for that. So, I do have so we started with a question, so we should probably end with a question. So I always ask at the end of my conversations, what's the one question you think we should all be asking ourselves these days about the future of work?
Hmm. So I lean into the same sort of theme, but maybe there are two thoughts that I have. One is this idea of how do we go from more to less to different, right? This is the theme we've been talking about. Um, and what does that different look like? I want to give you another example, actually. Sorry if I go longer, please stop me.
Oh no,
um,
it's okay. Fine.
there's this thing called Jevons paradox, right, which you may have heard of. It's come up a couple of times in the AI sense. The idea being when a technology comes in that makes things very efficient, you think you're going to need less of the resource. But because it's efficient, so much more gets done that actually the demand for resources goes up, not down.
Yeah.
There's a famous, more recent example. McDonald's had these kiosks in Singapore, lots of 300 stores, and they said, we'll put in these kiosks that you've seen, right? Instead of going to the counter, there's this thing and you order on the
Yep.
screen.
Yep.
They put in a ton of those. And people said, oh my God, technology has come in, all the cashiers will lose their jobs. And they did. But because the kiosk came in, people started coming in because the lines were much shorter and demand exploded. And so they had to go hire a ton more people in the backside in the kitchen to make the food. And so with technology, either the job changes like we've talked about, or some new type of job will crop up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay?
always give the example of the Industrial Revolution when they brought in machines to make, clothes or
Right. Or coal, right? The steam
yeah,
engine made
people.
it
Yeah,
very efficient.
even the clothes. The example is people used to. I mean, there were no clothing stores for people, right? I mean, you had like one pair of pants, one shirt. You wash them in the evening, you hung them to dry, and you wore them the next day. And suddenly, you had stores and closets and washing machines and fashion and all this stuff that happened because it doesn't cost that much to make clothes anymore, right? So
Yep. Yep.
that's been the case. Some people will argue that this is different, but
It is different in the following sense. So I'll go back to the theme we started with, which is specifically knowledge work. Now, one of the things that is bothering me as a leader of a company like this is the long term. And we are beginning to see this in healthcare. It will happen in consulting as well. We are going from distrust to trust. We talked about that, change adoption, all of that. But what the most fearful question for me is we go from trust to blind trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what is now happening, which I can begin to see, is that the consultant comes to me and says, I say, why are you coming up with this answer? Well, that's what the AI said. Right? So you begin to, after you go over this hump of, I don't trust it, to, yeah, it sort of works, to, you know what? Yeah, it works pretty well. I'm just going to go with it. Right?
Yeah.
You never question that Excel made a mistake.
And we started with that question, right? So are you able to question? In fact, the World Economic Forum, they published every few years, like the list of skills. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is they don't have a definition. So they have like critical thinking, but they're not defining what critical thinking is. And the critical thinking that was important 10 years ago, I'm not sure is the same critical thinking that is important today. And so, do we need to teach people to think differently when somebody does a portion of the thinking for you? For
exactly.
example,
So
yeah.
I mean, back to the asking the right question.
Yes.
Do you know what the right question is if you've never spent any time figuring out an answer?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. Is if you don't have deep expertise, because you don't need to anymore. It goes, but even the accountant, right? If you've never pulled together a column of numbers and tried to make them balance, will you know if the Excel messed up? And then AI is even more complicated because there's so much going on in the background. That's a really interesting thing. Wow. Thank you, Pratap, for joining me today. You've put some really interesting questions in front of us. For more about Pratap and his work with CS, you'll find the links in the show notes. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow the Future of Less Work wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, your best people do not work because you tell them to. They do not work because you measure them on it. They don't even work because you pay them. They work because by working for you is their way to accomplish what's important for them in life. Till next time.